So starch itself, as you would have seen from the first slide, is found in a lot of vegetable plant sources, and it's stored as the energy in the plant cells. So moving on, starch itself is made up of molecules of glucose, and these are linked together. So for the process of dextrinisation, what happens is as we heat the starch, so these are flames, as we heat the starch, if we pretend this is a slice of bread here, we've got these long chains of glucose that create the starch, create the piece of bread, and as we heat it we get a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction causes these bonds between the glucose chains to break, so they are no longer connected to each other. As we continue to heat, what happens is we have another chemical reaction, because the glucose molecules are made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So they actually now separate out. So we have the carbon separately, the hydrogen separately and the oxygen separately. And as we continue to heat the starch, or with the piece of bread, whichever carbohydrate we're talking about, the hydrogen and the oxygen react with each other to become water. So again, the heat has created this chemical reaction, given these two molecules some heat, and they've collided together to form water. And then we are left with this C, which is carbon. Now, when we are applying this dry heat to a carbohydrate, if I use bread as the example, the reason why it changes colour is because this chemical reaction, dextrinisation, happens, where the glucose molecules are separated, the carbon and the hydrogen and the oxygen are separated out, and the hydrogen and the oxygen create water. And what happens, as this water is still being heated, it evaporates from the food product, leaving behind carbon. Now, carbon is really dark in colour, which is why our carbohydrate foods now turn a golden brown colour. Now, if we continued to heat that slice of bread, it would get darker and darker, because more and more of the water that's been formed from the hydrogen and the oxygen that was originally in the glucose that makes the starch, the water even more evaporates, which leaves the carbon to show even more prominently, meaning the carbohydrate would get darker and darker and darker in colour until it goes to the true colour of carbon, which is black, if you just continue to heat and heat and heat. And this process of starch being broken down into glucose, and then the glucose being broken down into carbon, hydrogen and oxygen from the dry heat, is called dextrinisation.